Good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in to the MAPSCorps 2020 Virtual Scientific Symposium. For those of you who are new to MAPSCorps, I'm Andres Alvear. I'm the Executive Director of MAPSCorps. In a typical year, we would be gathered in person at Malcolm X College here in Chicago in some very large conference rooms full of youthful energy and hundreds of people who show up to hear from our young people in podium presentations, a panel, and also in a research poster session where they get to engage directly with the youth. In the spirit of our symposium, I want you to imagine that we're together interacting in person with our youth. Due to the pandemic, MAPSCorps has gone virtual. We have taken our normal boots on the ground asset mapping program and we've moved it to an online environment and created a meaningful remote work environment for young people to continue our asset mapping mission. Today, you'll hear from an extraordinary group of young people from Chicago, North Carolina, and New York City who have spent their summer working with us remotely, calling businesses and also validating data online and on social media, and studying the impact of the pandemic on our neighborhoods. We are so proud of their work. They have mapped more than 10,000 community assets and conducted hundreds of COVID-related surveys where we can understand the impact of the pandemic on local businesses. And we hope that that data will be used to reboot our neighborhoods after the pandemic. We're excited to share more about their work and their research today. Before we get to the young people, I want to take a moment to thank all of the partners, supporters, and the team that made this summer happen. The Chicago Department of Public Health, the Chicago Department of Family and Support Services, One Summer Chicago Program, After School Matters, our funders, CPAS Foundation, Sprague Institute, the AT&T, William Blair, the Healthy Community Foundation, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois, and the Staines Family Foundation. I also want to give a special thank you to the MAPSCorps staff, our seasonal summer team, and also our community partners here in Chicago and replication sites in New York, Mount Sinai Adolescent Health Center, and in North Carolina, the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. 2020 brought to MAPSCorps a number of first opportunities: remote mapping, our first virtual event, and our first national gathering. 2020 is also a significant year for me. As many of you know, this will be my last year with MAPSCorps. It will be my last year at the symposium as executive director, but I know not my last year at the symposium. It has been an honor to be part of the MAPSCorps family over the last 4 years. And I want to thank the MAPSCorps board, staff, our community partners and supporters, and our youth for your trust, your support, and your inspiration. I will always carry with me the MAPSCorps ethos of enthusiasm for the scientific inquiry, an asset-based mindset, and an absolute commitment to community and youth. As you will see today, the future is bright for youth and for MAPSCorps. With that, I will turn it over to our fabulous MAPSCorps alumnus, Cameron Okeke, who will be our MC for today. Enjoy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron Okeke, and I'm coming to you from Washington, D.C. Thank you, Andres, for that lovely introduction. And I will be your MC for the day. So I want to take this moment to kind of open up with a couple words about what MAPSCorps means to me. I am a senior program associate and research associate at the Bureau Institute of Justice, But more importantly, I'm an alumni to MAPSCorps. And I worked at MAPSCorps most of my summers at the University of Chicago. And I'm also a person who was born and raised in Chicago. And so this project has a kind of special meaning in my heart. And so they permitted me to take a couple minutes to talk about why, to talk to the mappers and tell them about why I'm so deeply admire what they do. So MAPSCorps is a project that I kind of hold dear to my heart because it kind of spoiled me when it came to research. It's a project that has youth and community and service at its heart, while having a healthy and robust love for data at its core. And I think now more than ever, I gave a speech about this at the symposium I went to probably almost 5 years ago, about why it was so important to have community researchers. And I think now more than ever, we need that. Now more than ever, we need mappers. We need people who are invested in building the assets of their community. I was born and raised in the South Side of Chicago. I went to the University of Chicago and I was a bio major, and I loved science, but I also loved service. So I was drawn to the University of Chicago Community Service Center, where I found MAPSCorps, where I met Chris Grable, where we got interested in positive youth development. And I got really interested in data justice, or what I thought then was just community research, and what it meant to bring power back to the people through a deep dedication to democratizing research, to making maps, to making things accessible. When we bring data back to our communities, like the mappers are doing, we bring power back to our people, make it possible to build enriching and new and creative lives for people. I believe we firmly have a moral obligation to use data information in service of our communities, in service of our loved ones. And so what does it mean to do research in service of the community? I would argue this is the gold standard of research. And the mappers have, what I loved about seeing in MAPSCorps is watching mappers take information that was near and dear to them. They knew that the experience of walking and talking to people, or in this case, virtually calling and interacting with people, gives you a different feel for what it is to be in community with people, and gives you a reverence for the data you're gathering. And so I can say for me personally, being part of MAPSCorps, changed my relationship to my community. I saw the beautiful artwork and fun experiences in the South Side of Chicago, but also changed my relationship to research, to know that it doesn't exist in a lab, but that it's actually all around us, and that any of us can partake in the research process. And it also changed my relationship to myself, and understanding that I can be part of a collective and be part of a team that shows up to build what we call a community. And so I think every mapper, every person who's partaken in MAPSCorps should be deeply proud of the work they're done and the work that they're doing, because what we're really doing is bringing power back to communities that so desperately need it. So thank you so much. It is an honor and a pleasure to be your MC for the day. I'll tell you a little bit about the format. So we're going to have a series of presentations by the Chicago teams, and then we're going to have a youth panel, look at that. And then we're going to have a series of presentations from the New York team and the Nash Edgecombe North Carolina team. And then we're going to have a panel after that. And then we're going to end with some lovely words from Stacey Lindow, the founder and director of MAPSCorps. So I'm going to lay down some ground rules so people can know. So I want to remind everyone that you can comment any question. We are on YouTube, and we'll pick out your questions for the panel. So you can start dropping those in. I'll be skimming through those as we go through the presentation. There's also, there's also a link to the YouTube chat box for signing in. There's a lot of technical stuff. That's not my jam. And the last bit is if the presentation lags at all, or if there's something like messes up at all, just refresh your browser. There's a lot of storms going around the country. I'm in DC right now, and it's just going to be raining forever, I guess. And so without further ado, it is my pleasure and honor to start introducing the young people. You'll be seeing recorded presentations, and I'll give a short reaction to that, and then we'll keep moving. So I'd like to introduce Kayla Hogan, Johnny Bravo, and Yinglei Wu to present on the business responses to COVID.
Hello, welcome to our research project for the Chicago Scientific Symposium. We will be presenting about COVID-19's impact on community well-being through the lens of financial impact on businesses and educational impact on students. My name is Kayla.
I'm Yinglei.
My name is Johnny.
And we worked with 2 community-based organizations. Our goal for Centers for New Horizons, Bronzeville, is to identify the impact online learning has had on the well-being of students in Bronzeville. And our goal for Brighton Park neighborhood counselors is to check how businesses are doing during the pandemic and see what resources business owners need to stay open.
Our research question is, what are the financial and resource needs of minority-owned small businesses and the educational needs of students in Brighton Park and Brownsville in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and how has that impacted the overall health and well-being of the communities? We are focusing on meeting the needs of CBOs, splitting the project into 2 by looking at businesses in Brighton Park and students in Brownsville.
For our research methods, we use a combination of both quantitative and qualitative methods. We conducted a survey of small businesses in Brighton Park and a second survey of students in Bronzeville. We also did interviews with both sites.
First, we will present the results of the BPNC-based research of business needs in Brighton Park. The 2019 map on the left shows that trade services, personal services, and restaurants are the 3 most common assets. So we can focus on finding ways to support those 3 branches. The 2020 map on the right indicates that the status of many businesses are currently unknown, showing the difficulty of communicating during the pandemic.
This is our finding from the Brighton Park surveys. Our first 2 pie charts shows that 50% of the businesses are unsure if they can stay open, with 20% expecting to close. Uncertainty is key. 60% are not ready for another shutdown. Next slide. Our Likert scale on the left shows an overall negative financial impact. Our second Likert scale shows that businesses have been stressed due to their financial information.
For our BPNC recommendations, we interviewed Edgar Cabezas from Special Service Area 39, a community organization that has been providing grants to businesses in Brighton Park and Archer Heights. Based on the interview, our recommendations to BPNC on supporting businesses are create a better outreach to businesses by establishing a communication channel, hold a town hall with businesses, build a COVID-19 relief budget that provides businesses with sanitary equipment, consult with businesses on establishing a digital presence, building a long-lasting network with businesses with these efforts and other initiatives.
We will now shift to the results of our second sub-project, which is the impact COVID-19's had educationally on students. Next slide. This map of Grand Boulevard's childcare and schools show that the switch to online learning has affected many different kinds of institutions, from daycares to universities.
This is our finding from the CNH and Brownsville survey. Our Likert scale on the top left shows that students on average have done more self-learning while maintaining their social connection. Our Likert scale on the bottom left shows that students on average are less likely to report anxiety from online learning. However, when ranking concern on the right, we saw that students are polarized. We see that many students are very concerned about COVID-19 and their ability to learn, and many students are not very concerned. This polarization shows that pandemic has affected every student uniquely, so intervention must be based on the needs of students.
For our Bronzeville recommendations, we interviewed the Chicago Public Schools Equity Office to gain some insights about some possible interventions to support students. Here are some of our recommendations. Help students understand that education might be online based. Find ways to help students distress and stay motivated. Distribute resources to disproportionately affected areas. Support individual students who may have trauma. Have conversations about the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement. We hope this research and our recommendations can guide communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kayla, Johnny, and Yingwei Wu. I really appreciate that. I thank you for capturing the impact of COVID on businesses and students. The recommendation for having a town hall, I think, is a really good idea. And the building lasting healthy relationships is always a key to building a healthy community. And so, and I was also really surprised by the U-shape curve on being worried about COVID, but I think your analysis is really on point. So I want to move on and introduce Davion Wiley and Rowan Vargas to present on the effects of COVID on the digital divide.
I'm gonna start. All right, hi, my name is Davion Wiley.
And hi, I'm Rowan Vargas, and our presentation is on the digital divide.
Our presentation, like Rowan just said, is about the digital divide, which is the gap between those who have computer and internet access and those who don't.
Our research question was, how has COVID-19 influenced students' access to communicative technology in the Albany Park area? A quick overview of Albany Park shows that the population of Albany Park is above average at 50,000 residents, and the race and ethnic makeup of Albany Park is predominantly Hispanic and white. Next.
Our research methods consisted of surveys that we sent via email and interviews that we did with the CPS Equity Office. Next slide. Our MAPSCorps data results consisted of MAPSCorps data that states we only have 5 technology resource locations. We also created our own Google map that consulted resources that offer computer and internet access.
Our secondary data results came from Kids First Chicago and shows that 22% of households in Albany Park don't have access to the internet and 12% don't have access to a computer. This is especially troubling due to remote learning requiring access to the internet and a computer. Inability to do so would result in detriment to education. Next.
Our survey results showed that 84.6% of the 13 teachers surveyed said that their students never or rarely had to purchase their own device. Most students use smartphones and laptops to do their coursework. Also, 25% of one CPS teacher students could not have internet access, and it was substandard access that had to be shared with siblings.
Our recommendations are to expand affordable hotspot and laptop lending programs, and for public libraries and possibly private businesses to expand public technology resource spaces and programs with them. And in order to raise awareness for these spaces and programs, we would post flyers around essential businesses so families who do not have access to the internet can find them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. This is a really great presentation. I appreciate the kind of focus on the family and on making sure that families that don't have access to internet aren't left behind, and also a great mixture of data sources and analysis. Excellent job, y'all. I'd like to move on to introducing Abigail Hernandez and Nate Luna Stinger to present on the effects of COVID on the digital divide.
Hi, I'm Nathaniel Luna Stinger.
And I'm Abigail Hernandez.
We're representing Logan Square. LSNA is our CBO. Our topic's the digital divide, which is the gap between those who do and those who do not have access to internet. And our research question is how effective were the approaches taken by educational institutions in the Logan Square community area? Some background about Logan Square is that it's a neighborhood going through gentrification. The bar graph shows that the white demographic was the only one which grew over the years, while the other demographics shrank.
So our research methods consisted of a mixed methods research, both quantitative and qualitative, from open-ended survey questions and an interview with the CPS Office of Equity. Our secondary data comes from the Kids First Chicago data. 19% of the households did not have broadband internet access, and 13% of these households did not have computer access. Keep in mind there are multiple people in these households, and since Logan Square is a large community, these small percentages represent a large number of individuals. For our survey highlights, 1 being much worse and 5 being much better, teachers on average felt the quality of instruction is better, but felt their ability to help struggling students got worse when transitioning to online instruction.
This first pie graph represents teachers' stance about students having the resources needed to succeed. That's technology and internet, and around half said no. The second pie chart depicts teachers' feelings about the quality of the resources provided to students. Teachers say it wasn't enough. The need was never met. The biggest words on this word wall appear frequently in our open-ended responses. And the big picture is the risk of in-person classes and the quality of remote learning.
So for our recommendations for our CBOs, we said communicate with CPS for teachers and parents to collaborate to better support their students and create a website of frequently asked questions where parents and students can access and also ask questions from a tech expert. And that concludes our presentation.
Excellent job, Abigail and Nate. I really appreciate the open-ended surveys and the interviews. I like that use of qualitative data, and I also love taking word clouds. This is like one of my favorite things, and using the present responses. I think it gives a nice visual and also like is very impactful. I want to remind folks you can keep showing love in the comments. Folks are loving the presentations you're doing, and I also appreciate y'all naming gentrification and displacement and how that's impacting the digital divide. So excellent work. I want to introduce Aidan Blunt and Talia Bickard to present on the effects of COVID on food insecurity.
This is the Chicago Scientific Symposium. I'm Aidan.
My name is Talia.
And here's some background information about the CBOs we are working with. Claretians Associates is a community-based organization located in South Chicago. They aspire to create a community that is affordable and safe through improvements in employment, safety, healthcare, housing, arts, and more. Greater Auburn Gresham Development Corporation is a corporation located in Auburn Gresham. They strive to promote community revitalization by designing programs to improve community economic viability, housing quality and affordability, and delivery of social services. Our overall research question is, how has community access to food security been impacted by COVID-19?
These are the research methods that we use to carry out our research project. MAP, South Chicago, Auburn Gresham, Inglewood, and Riverdale with special attention to grocery and convenience stores. Second, perform data collection and analysis from secondary sources like the Chicago Health Atlas and the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. Lastly, survey residents of community areas in the Far South Hub.
As you see in the gray chart above, we documented the median age in each specific community, and I've also located the food stores per 5,000 population, Inglewood being the highest, Riverdale being the lowest. The places we use for our data are Auburn Gresham, Inglewood, Riverdale, and South Chicago. Below that is the per capita income and total population graph for each neighborhood.
We compared 2019 and 2020 MAPSCorps data to determine any changes in food stores due to COVID-19. As you can see, there was an 11.4% decrease in the number of food stores. We asked several Likert scale questions asking community members how much they agree or disagree with several statements. The results showed that people felt neutral about the first and second questions, which asked whether they felt financial stress due to COVID and if they were worried about accessing food during COVID. People tended to agree with the third and fourth questions about increases in food spending and worrying about health when grocery shopping. Finally, we have some recommendations for the CBOs and community members based on the results of the community member survey. Continue to host pop-up distributions to provide residents with essential resources. Consider streaming future events after the pandemic. Help and reach out to your neighbors, especially elderly people, after the pandemic, and practice self-care and take COVID-19 precautions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aiden and Tuli. I really appreciate the really strong research plan of mixing secondary sources and primary data collection. I'm completely floored by the complete loss of food stores from COVID. That's really devastating. But I also love that there are young people advocating for people to reach out to older people during the pandemic and after the pandemic. Really incredible work. I'd like to introduce Clavenique and Everardo Luna from the Centers New Horizons and the Sinai Community Institute to present on mental health healing spaces.
Chicago Scientific Symposium, provided by Nyla Larry, Everardo Luna, and Clevenique Edwards. Next slide.
Our project is titled An Assessment of Mental Health Needs and Resources in the North Lawndale Community, and we worked in collaboration with the Mount Sinai Community Institute in order to come up with a direction for our project. Next slide. Our research question this summer was, what community mental health services exist in the North Lawndale neighborhood, and how can these services best support the mental health of the youth living in the community? Building off of that question, we were also interested in the ways that these resources and spaces have changed since the initial COVID outbreak. From this research, we hope to better understand trends in the mental health of the youth living in the community, as well as the effect that COVID had on their health. From there, we wanted to compile community mental health resources in North Lawndale to ensure that residents are aware of and have access to the care that they need.
North Lawndale is a neighborhood on the west side of Chicago. We used data from the Chicago Community Snapshot to create the graphs, showing that majority of residents in North Lawndale are Black and that nearly a third of residents are youth under the age of 19. Therefore, we focused our project on the mental health needs of youth in the community. Next slide. Next, we looked at data from the Chicago Community Health Atlas. When doing this project, we found statistics demonstrating the high rates of uninsurance and poverty as well as high rates of violent crime. This graph showcases the rates of various mental health conditions among residents of North Lawndale. These statistics together show a high need for low-cost mental health care, including care that specifically addresses violence prevention and treatment for PTSD. Next slide. Our form of data collection consists of a survey we designed. We also examined last year MAPSCorps data and identified all of the businesses that offered mental health services. Next slide.
So the main aspect of our project this summer was the creation of this map, and you can access it through the link on the screen. We intend for this map to be a publicly available resource for members of the North Lawndale community, and it shows the mental health resources available to them. We enhanced the MAPSCorps dataset to include the services offered by these organizations, the cost to utilize their service, and the age ranges that they work with. Through detailed web scrapes and phone calls, we determined whether these organizations offered services in violence prevention, psychiatric care, counseling, addiction care, or group-based therapies. And we hope that this data will make it easier for community members to find the specific care that they need. So in the course of creating this dataset, we noticed several trends in the resource offering of North Lawndale, including the fact that relatively few organizations offered low cost or free care to those who could not afford it. We also found a lack of psychiatric care within the neighborhood, as well as lack of care for specific members of different groups, such as seniors and veterans.
We received 4 responses to our survey. Because of the limited sample, we were not able to use the survey data as a large part of our project. But some things we noticed were that none of the respondents had used mental health care in their community before. Cost was an important factor, and that they got their information about mental health services primarily from social media. Next slide.
So through this project, we learned a lot about the community mental health assets currently available in North Lawndale. Thanks to this, we identified gaps in care options and the visibility to those who need it. We recommend that community-based organizations focus their communications to channels that young people use, such as social media. We also see a need for additional telehealth resources to reduce barriers for community members who are unable to physically go to the clinic. We also identified a high need for mental health care in the neighborhood, combined with an overall lack of mental health services. Finally, community members should be informed of mental health resources and programs that are offered in their community. Using the information we collected in our study, knowledge about mental health resources could and should be distributed to those who could benefit from them. Thank you.
Wow, just Wow, yeah, that's incredible. I mean, a map, like I mean, I'm just overjoyed at the fact that you're bringing your community more resources. It's a beautiful thing. Like you're building, you're building access to needs, and also like adding a resource, an accessible and clear and visually stimulating resource with wonderful recommendations around mental health. So like kudos to you all. I want to thank all of the panelists. This is just the first half. I mean, all the presentations is the first half of them for Chicago. Thank you so much. You've done our city very proud. And I want to move on to our youth panel. So we're in for a wonderful treat. I'm actually going to be able to talk to and engage with some of the mappers and ask them about their experience. So you people watching need to put your questions into the comments, and I will be pulling questions out. I also have questions of my own, and we'll just be having the conversation flow. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Nyla Larry, Nate Stinger Luna, Samuel Robinson, and Johnny Bravo. Hello, everyone. It is wonderful to see y'all out here in your wonderful presentations. If you've seen the comments, everyone thinks y'all are awesome, and it's true. If you could do us all the favor of taking turns, introducing yourselves, you say your name, your pronouns, the organization you worked with, and just one thing you found interesting or a surprise that you learned this summer.
I'll go first. My name is Nyla. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I worked with Sinai this summer. The one thing that I learned was to communicate with people better. I really appreciate this opportunity that I worked with MAPSCorps this summer because it taught me a whole different level of communication. Yeah.
You got it. Go ahead.
I'm Nate. I'm he, him, his pronouns, and I'm with Logan Square Neighborhood Association. And I have to say, one of the things I liked the most this year was when we got to try out the prototype for the MAPSCorps app.
Oh, awesome. I want to hear more about that later, but thank you.
Okay. My name is Samuel Robinson. My pronouns are he, him. And this year I had the pleasure of working with Greater Auburn Gresham Development Corporation. And one thing I found interesting is just being a part of the community and learning their needs and like trying to help them out with what we do.
Hi, my name is Johnny. I go by he. I work with the Brighton Park Neighborhood Council, and the most interesting thing was probably just looking at the data that we gathered.
Thanks, Johnny. Thank you all. So I just want to, just so that we're all on the same page, because I'm sure the people in there are dying to know. Could someone give us like just a real quick overview of what virtual mapping looks like as opposed to like perhaps regular mapping?
Oh, you go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah,
Since I've only worked with MAPSCorps for 2 years, last summer was my first summer mapping like in person, and I'll say it was a lot more hectic. We had to be outside in the heat and any type of weather there was simply because that was our job. But being able to do it in the comfort of my home and being able to call the businesses and verify information, it was a lot more calm and a lot more tolerable because I didn't have to be out there on a bus in the heat with a mapping phone that was crashing every 2 minutes. So it was just a lot better.
Yeah, definitely remember those summers. The Chicago summers are unforgiving. So did anyone have any challenges that they came across while doing virtual mapping this year?
I can speak on that. So I feel like one of the main challenges for me mapping this year opposed to other years was just the fact that we didn't really have that personal connection. Like when you're in person, you get to see the person, you're asking them and they know who you are, you're seeing their face, they're a lot more comfortable. But over the phone, like a lot of people were a lot more skeptical to seem more like a scam because like you're really on the phone asking the person about their business and all this other like invasive questions. So a lot of people were like skeptical to get to give us these answers. So that was one of the biggest challenges for me.
Excellent. Other challenges?
I think the biggest challenge for me was like just when you're mapping in person, you can knock and go inside the business, and you can see that there's people there. But if you're virtually calling them, then you don't really know if they're at their establishment or not.
That makes a lot of sense. So that brings the question. I'll take one of the questions from the comments. Someone asked, were you able to get more information on each organization when calling? So for those of you who've done in-person mapping and digital mapping or remote mapping, were you able to get more information?
I could say something. I wouldn't say we got more information from calling because it seemed kind of like the longer the call went on, the less likely people were to give answers to questions. But doing the virtual mapping, we used a lot more web scrapes, which led to me finding a lot more websites for places we didn't have websites for, or finding social media.
Nice. Cool. One of the questions I had for y'all is about how representative you felt the data was. So all of you employed like various really incredible different data sources to do your presentations. But how representative do you think your findings are of your neighborhood?
With my neighborhood specifically in Auburn Gresham, I felt like it was well represented of the neighborhood because we did have a lot of responses. You always want to have more, but I feel like we had a general good amount of responses. The only thing I'll say we were missing this year was maybe the responses from the youth, because a lot of the time the youth they don't have the resources like the internet access and what they need to like get to the surveys because we're online. A lot of it is either calling or through email, and a lot of them didn't have that. So I feel like we were missing a lot of the youth's voice this year, but I still think it was a great representation of the community.
Appreciate that. Yeah, and I think I appreciate that a lot because I think there is like that youth voice is really important, which is why this panel is really awesome. Do you all have any like thoughts on how we can get how we could bridge that divide, or was it easier to get young people the youth voice when pre-COVID?
Oh yeah, a lot easier for sure. Because like a lot of the time we were walking the streets and you would like run into you, so I feel like it was a lot easier back. I shouldn't say back then, like it was years ago, but last year it was a lot easier.
It feels like years ago.
Simply because we were running to them, right? But yeah, we were running right into them. We would talk to them, have a conversation. They want to know what we're doing. So yeah, it was a lot more interactive.
So that makes a lot of sense. So one thing I also wanted to ask, then I'll move to a question from the comments. So a lot of your projects are talking about COVID and talking about the impact of COVID. I wanted to see, in your view, what are some of the other what are the other systemic challenges that people are facing in your community right now?
I feel like just people, like some people don't all have like Wi-Fi and a laptop and like other resources, like information that is out there, but they can't access it. That's like one big challenge.
Yeah, and like piggybacking off what like Donnie was saying, like a lot of the people were like in poverty-stricken like situations before COVID. So like a lot of people didn't have the resources, a lot of people didn't have the money, and they were like really trying to make ends meet. And then COVID really came and really made it a lot harder for those people who were already in those bad situations. A lot of it being because of their neighborhood, a lot of it being because of like the way they grew up. So I feel like that's a lot of the systemic challenges that they face that COVID really like doubled. So like I feel like that was a big thing that hit the community.
Yeah, appreciate that. No, I definitely, that definitely resonates with my experience of COVID. So yeah, for sure. I want to take a question from the audience. Someone asked, based on the experience you guys had this year as a mapper, if everything is straight next year as far as COVID, which, you know, fingers crossed, do you think that you may want to move up to the field coordinator position?
I definitely want to be a field coordinator for next year if all goes well and, you know, COVID decides to, you know, pack up his things and leave. I really do want to be a field coordinator because I really do admire the field coordinators this year, especially because they had to shift just as well as we did. And they had to become acclimated with this entire thing as we were all doing it. So they had to lead us and bear this change as well. So it just made me really admire the field coordinators as a whole. And I do want to be a field coordinator next year, if at all possible.
Yeah, I agree too. I would also like to be a field coordinator. Well, for one, nobody's complaining about more money, and for two, it's like I feel like a lot of people, like the field coordinators this year, like they were really like engaged with the community, and I feel like that's one of the main things that you need to have to be a field coordinator because like when you know your community, you feel more strongly about your community. You want to help a lot more, and I feel like I have a lot of views that I want to put into the youth of this generation. So I feel like being a field coordinator would like really help a lot.
Yeah, going off of that, like it'd be really cool to like, you know, like we've been working with these mentors. It'd be nice to like take up that torch, become the mentors. And that's including like being mentored by people working within MAPSCorps itself, working with the field coordinators.
I'm not sure if I would be a coordinator, but if I was, then I would just make sure to like help my mappers. Like my field coordinators, they did a good job helping me, so I want to do the same.
Yeah, I mean, as a person who was a field coordinator, I can say all of you would make amazing field coordinators. So like, you know, if like y'all are crushing it. So excellent work. I want to take another question from the chat. The question was, how long on average were the phone calls with businesses during the interviews? So like, you know, when you're calling, how long would you say they were?
Depending on if they answer, like, and if they want to talk, it could be 3 seconds, it could be like 3 minutes. So a lot of the time, people were skeptical of who we were. They didn't want to like really give us any information. But a lot of the relationships that we built last year, some of them knew us from last year, so they wanted to talk, and a lot of them gave us more information than we needed, and like we really got to talk to them and like just really build on what we needed, got our information for the research and the surveys. So they were like really eager to talk. So just depending on who they knew or who we knew, they were talking on.
Excellent. No. Anyone want to add on to that? Cool. I have another question for y'all. So what do you see? So you all laid out a bunch of really great recommendations. They're all different, and I really appreciate them. But so what do you see as like the biggest challenge to implementing your recommendations? So anyone can go.
For my project specifically, our group did the lack of mental health healing spaces in North Lawndale, and the most challenging thing to implement our recommendations would be the stigma against mental health in the community, because North Lawndale is a community built on mostly Black and brown people. So mental health is not really a priority in those communities. And it would be very beneficial to change that stigma that mental health is not important in said community so that there can be more resources and those resources can be utilized.
Yeah, and you got it. Go ahead.
I was gonna say that for my project, for our recommendations, we thought it would be our biggest obstacle would probably be communication. because part of what we want to do is like help parents create Gmail so they can get more involved. But especially through COVID, helping someone set up a Gmail or a CPS email specifically probably wouldn't be that easy, especially for every single parent. Like, I think it's a lot of work.
For sure.
Needed work, but yeah, a lot of work.
Oh,
That's
yeah, a
true.
lot. And I feel my project was really working on like food security, and I feel like the hardest thing with that is like really trying to like secure places where we can like give out this food, how we're gonna get the food, like how we're gonna get the resources to give back to the community. And like my GAGDC, Greater Auburn Gresham Development Corporation, specifically like wanted to buy a building so we could like really make a like mental health center, food security, like giving out food, all types of things. But those things are hard to secure simply because a lot of the buildings are vacant, but they're like extremely hard to like get into them and get them. Like the city kind of makes it very hard for you to get it. And I feel like that is also a part of like the systemic racism that's in the communities. But we are really just taking it one day at a time and like just try to help the community as much as we can.
For Brighton Park, for business owners, like we just recommend them to like try to reach out like for help like with their local neighborhood council and like maybe ask for resources. And for students, like find ways to de-stress and like stay motivated and stay in school.
Yeah, excellent. I think we have time for one more question. I'm looking in the comments to see if there's anyone more who wants to ask one last question. If not, I will ask a question. I have many. I have a question. So for you as like a young person, what is one of your favorite assets in your community?
Probably like the local food shops and stuff, restaurants.
Yeah, I will also say like something like maybe the parks and whatnot, because you see a lot of, well, nowadays you see more kids playing in the parks, and you see like a lot of more people having fun. Well, not with COVID right now, but recently since I've been living in my community for years, like I see increase in like people going to the park and people going outside.
I would say the public libraries. It's like a place to cool down, expand your mind. And then in a lot of cases, it serves as internet access for some people.
Personally, my entire family lives in my community also. So my family members do own businesses in the community. So those are my favorite assets.
Hey. Excellent. I want to thank all of you for doing such a wonderful job. I mean, this has been an enriching and enlightening conversation. I know people in the chat it's going wild right now. So y'all are rock stars. Thank you so much, Nyla. Thank you so much, Nate. Thank you so much, Johnny. Thank you so much, Samuel. Thank you so much for bringing so much to this conversation. So kudos to yourselves. And we're moving on with the show. Thank you so much. So I want to take this time to move on to our next set of presentations. So we're going to have some presentations about New York from Mount Sinai Adolescent Health Center. I want to remind people there will also be another panel later on featuring New York and the Nashcombe Edge participants, and that's in North Carolina. So our first presentation is going to be on health and childcare resources during COVID by Sahing De La Rosa and Dana Jackson.
Hello, everyone. We are the Jackson Heights Mapping Group. My name is Dana, and my partner name is Sahing. We have two other members named Mia and Amber. We thank them for helping us with the project. Today, we will be discussing about how MAPSCorps help community members within Jackson Heights locate useful resources in their neighborhood. We verify information to make sure the people within the community had access to different services. By verifying information, we making sure people have the correct information, such as phone numbers, addresses, websites, and more, in order to contact different businesses. By having the correct information, people will be able to access to health, economic, and other services.
we were mapping the area of Jackson High using the code 11327. I mean 72. Which these are fun facts that we found that Jackson High has. For example, teen pregnancy is higher than New York City. Children from kindergarten to eighth grade are obese, and diabetes and hypertension is higher than New York City. New York City. Socioeconomic disappearance, like other facts. Jackson High has the longest, lived the longest in New York City. Resident 25% of residents live in poverty, and 59 residents are rent burning at a higher rate than citywide. Some solutions that we have for this disability, this disabilities, are health cures, healthy food, and gyms, fitness centers. Our research question is where impact has the COVID-19 on available resources on the community of Jackson Heights.
So we targeted areas in Jackson Heights that were mainly affected by COVID-19, which was health services, education tutoring services, employment services, and social services. We called a specific number out of 361 places in Jackson Heights. There were mainly questions asked, such as, do I need an appointment or can I just walk in? Have you been affected by COVID-19? What ages are served? And what are some requirements needed to access those services? Next slide. Based on the data gathered from mapping in recent years, we have noticed there are a lot of health services and there's a little bit of mental health services. But out of those services being mapped, we noticed 13 sites have been moved and 8 were closed.
Throughout this time we were mapping, we actually creating a booklet. This is our booklet. We got on the left side our picture, our cover, and on the right side we got all the places that we already mapped. Next.
These are recommendations, also ways of how to locate other areas within MAPSCorps, making it faster, such as social media, like Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook. We also have communication with other organizations through advertisement. We also have sending emails and paperwork to ideas on how communities in Queens area are affected by COVID-19 to financially state them. Next slide.
Do you have any questions? If you do, then let us know. But anyways, thank you for your time and have a nice day.
I am so pressed. This is another community resource guy. I love seeing research that creates more investment and more dissemination in the community. That's incredible. Please, if you're not in the chat already, show some love in the chat for that wonderful presentation. We'll be hearing from Singh later on our panel. I'd love to introduce another New York presentation on health and childcare on resources during COVID by Keisha Diaz and Jessica Rosario.
Okay, hello, I'm Keisha Diaz, and this is Jessica Rosario. We're speaker educators at the Mount Sinai Adolescent Health Center. We are working with MAPSCorps, and our specific group was the South Bronx. In the MAPSCorps in the South Bronx, over the last few weeks, we have been gathering information about the resources and services that would help the South Bronx, from businesses, shelters, to daycares, to clinics, and many more. Overall, we investigated some businesses in certain community areas on the side, and we try to find/confirm things like the operation hours, how they have been affected by COVID, and such adaptations that they've had to make, either for the or for themselves, so that the community can have better access.
Okay, so the community areas we were looking into are the zip codes listed below, so 10451, 10453, 10456, and 10457. And some of the common struggles within these communities usually have to do with finance, child education, and housing.
The research question. Our biggest question was, what impact has COVID-19 had on the available resources in the communities of the South Bronx? Due to COVID-19, many resources in the South Bronx have become more difficult to get access to because of things having to close down temporarily, change in operation hours, or limited capacity. Our research method. Our target area was the South Bronx. We collectively called over 300 organizations to ensure that they are both open when the communities have access to all the offered resources. Some of the questions asked questions such as, has COVID-19 affected the services? What are their operational hours? And what is the capacity limit? As many more questions.
Okay. Out of 428 places, we were able to map 227 of those businesses, and 51 of those places had to close down temporarily due to COVID-19. And a lot of the places that we had to map were actually daycares, which also had to close down unless they were being used as a shelter. And a small amount of those places continued virtually, but they were mostly schools that students were just doing over email and Zoom. And some of the types of places we were looking into had to do with employment services, health services, mental health services, childcare services, social services, education, and tutoring services. And here's just a visual representation of the areas we were looking into. So once again, the zip codes 10451, 10453, 10456, and 10457.
Our community resource guide. On the left, we can see the cover page. We decided to choose the landmark of 161, which is the Yankee Stadium, a famous place in the Bronx. On the right, we can see an example of many questions that we have to ask working with MAPSCorps. And on the bottom, we can see examples of places that have given us these answers, such as the South Bronx Job Corps, the Fulton Daycare Center, and the New Discoveries Day.
So in order to improve our mapping skills in the future or to help future mappers, we believe that we should give them a few of the methods and strategies that we use to help us throughout this mapping experience, which something you can do is make the calls first and then put the information into a spreadsheet, or you can do the web search first and then call later on to confirm the information that you got, or you can even just do the calls and write the information down on paper and then come back to the spreadsheet later to make the process faster for you.
So thank you for listening to our Google Slides for the South Bronx. That's our group. If you have any questions, now would be the available time to ask.
Okay, so I'm always normally really upset when people say that Chicago is not as good as New York, because it's not true. But New York is having a showing with another resource guide. Incredible. I love that y'all also iterated on the entire process of doing virtual mapping as well. So like innovation on top of innovation. And I really appreciate highlighting the loss of daycare. I know there's parents out there right now who can feel that. And I appreciate y'all capturing the data dimension of what is definitely a heartfelt loss in these communities. So I want to also want to introduce our North Carolina Nash EDUCOM presentation. They're presenting on educational attainment and transportation. And I'm introducing Jasmine Atkins and Angel Garcia.
Hello, welcome to MAPSCorps National EDUCOM Scientific Symposium presentation.
My name is Angel Garcia, and I'm a rising super senior at the NCPS Early College. I've been a mapper for 3 years, and my favorite thing about mapping is probably getting to see how the community has developed over the past few years.
Hello, my name is Jasmine Atkinson. I'm a rising freshman at North Carolina Central University. I have been a mapper for 3 years, and my favorite thing about mapping is getting to know new people.
So in my past years at MAPSCorps, we usually do poster presentations for the symposium, but due to the pandemic going on right now, we had to adapt and we decided to do a virtual presentation. We created a community profile, which is in an infographic style. It has 3 sections, which are overview, resources, and recommendations, which we'll go more into depth about later on. The infographic also had important graphs and charts. We also made sure to center our projects on how our community remained resilient throughout the pandemic.
We had 4 topics for our research project, but today we will be focusing on transportation project conducted by Angel and educational attainment project conducted by me.
For the first section, we conducted some baseline background research on how our topic affected Rocky Mount and as a social determinant of health. For my specific topic, I found that Rocky Mountain lacks adequate walkability, forcing people to drive more often. Interviewees have suggested walkability be increased as this would help the community's overall economic and physical health, helping the community feel more united.
For my topic, I found that education can play into other statistics like literacy and unemployment. Students in rural areas such as Rocky Mount have had a much lower educational achievement, such as lower literacy rates than urban students. And I have also found that people with more education is more likely to be employed and have a job that provides benefits such as health insurance, paid leave, and retirement, which helps the overall economy. For the second part of the infographic, we identified through MAPSCorps data what resources existed for our topics.
For my project, I found that there were a total of 73 mapped resources spread across 6 subtypes.
And for my project, I found that 52 numbers of resources spread across 7 subtypes.
Also, for this section, we identified the types of services these resources provide, how they adapted to COVID-19, and how they display community resiliency. We developed an interview guide with help from some of the researchers at UNC and interviewed community organizations. For my project, I found that a local organization offers transportation to the local community. They have continued to offer transportation even throughout the pandemic, since people's needs never change. The City of Rocky Mount has implemented measures to minimize the spread of COVID-19, such as mask wearing, hand sanitizer being readily available, and more frequent cleaning of surfaces.
And for my project, I found that COVID-19 closed a lot of schools, and when it did, teachers had to find a way to work with their community partners so they can get the information to their students for classes. For the last section of the project, we used the interview data with the help from researchers at UNC. We created recommendations for Rocky Mount and these community resources to help them better prepare for other disasters.
For my project, I found that some short-term recommendations are that transportation needs to be extended to more rural areas and the frequency of times a bus comes by needs to be increased. Longer-term recommendations would be that sidewalks need to be maintained properly, made safer, and need to be connected more. Other recommendations would be bike lanes and a bike system, which would be a great addition, and a light rail system would also be an amazing option for future planning.
For my project, I found that technology should be more affordable and accessible to students, especially in this pandemic, because not every student can afford nor have access to Wi-Fi.
And that concludes our presentation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for naming the interlocking relationship between health and education and transportation. I love that you all are recommending an increase in accessibility and affordability and changing the built environment. It's really incredible. And I also think it's just really essential that we record the ways communities are adapting to people's needs and offer insights on how services can better connect. So amazing presentation, great job. I would like to thank all the groups from New York and from Nash EdCo for their presentations, and we're going to be moving on to our panel. I want to point out that, like, again, you can, if you have questions about the presentations, about mapping, about any of that, please put them in the chat. I'll be pulling them out during the panel. And without further ado, I would love to introduce our panel. So our panel includes Kishlyn Diaz, Sahim De La Rosa, and Brittany Young. Hey y'all, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hi.
Great presentation. Hi. I want to, that's like the last panel. I want to just like introduce you all to everyone who's watching. So if you could just say your name, your pronouns, what organization you work with, and one thing you found interesting or surprising this summer.
I'll go first. I'm Kishlyn Diaz. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I work with Mount Sinai Adolescent Health Center. And something interesting about mapping for the summer this year was watching all the ways that we could help our communities and different ways, different places that were open, that were available as resources for our communities. Yeah.
Oh, see, you're muted.
So my name is De La Rosa. My pronouns is him, he.
his. Something surprising that I found is that Jackson High has the highest amount of health services compared to New York City, and less mental health services and economic services.
Hmm.
Hi, I'm Brittany, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a research assistant through the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And I would say one of the most surprising things was just seeing how quickly community organizations adapted to COVID and how just the steps they took to better just support their community.
Nice. Thank you all. So I'm going to start us off with a question, and then I'm going to get into some of the questions from the chat. A quick question that I'm curious about, because there's a lot of different recommendations that kind of went around. What do you see as kind of a big obstacle to getting your recommendations met for your projects?
Can I go?
Yeah, of course.
So compared to last year, because like I was mapping last year, I was a mapper. So compared to last year, I actually made like a real challenge, because like we have to walk. Like last year we had to walk to the places and actually do the mapping, but now we like gotta like do online research, and that actually has been more complicated because most of the time people on the phone they not want to agree about giving us information, and maybe because of like they think we were bad I don't know how to say this bothering them, like which like they don't give us the information that we need, so we had to we like sometimes we couldn't finish the places because like without the information we couldn't like do the actual mapping, so like it's complicated to also finish that booklet.
Yeah, I agree with what Sane said. Adding on to that, there's a lot of places that not only may not trust you with their information, but they think that you want information that's very personalized. So they'll leave you on a phone call for a long time, and you might stay there, and they put you to bigger and bigger managers because they think that this information is so private, or the information that we want is not verified information. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we had to deal with meeting the standards that we have.
I think for us, it was just technology, because everyone's on different Wi-Fi, on different devices. So it was just making sure during our mapping time here in North Carolina that everyone's cell phones were working, everyone's computers were working, and the app was having problems sometimes. So we would have to try to rehash how to fix it, because our research assistant and our project supervisor were in Chapel Hill, and our students are in Rocky Mount. So now we could try and see what was wrong.
And our project supervisor were in Chapel Hill, and our students are in Rocky Mount. And I was try and see what was wrong. Research assistant and our project supervisor.
Magically entered an forever loop of your own voice. But no, thank you for that. Thank you all for talking about the challenges you're facing while you're trying to do virtual mapping. Hopefully, Brittany, you don't end up in a forever loop again. But I want to take one of the questions from the comments. Someone asked, what were the major businesses you found open besides grocery stores?
I'll answer that one. For New York City, the South Bronx, which is the group that I was in, we found a lot of daycares and schools that were open. Me personally, I think that was something very confusing, because knowing that we're under a pandemic and under a very hard time, New York City or in the South Bronx, they should have had open medical places, or places that can help people with their mental health, with physical health, anything that needs to be done. But medical, and most places were daycares and schools that were open. So I think that besides supermarkets and places like that, there were places that weren't very relevant to the situations we're in now, but are still open, even though it should have been the opposite way.
For us, like for Jackson Heights, we found that Jackson Heights has like a really high amount of health services, like places, and that's actually something good, because like throughout this COVID time, Jackson High has the highest cases of COVID. So like now they having these like services, they actually can help the community members on what they need. So that's actually something good that we find out.
In North Carolina, I would say one of the most surprising things was a lot of repair businesses. So just like essential businesses that you don't really think about. So car dealerships, the things that are necessary for people to be able to go to the grocery store, be able to do these different things. So dealerships, car repairs, like RV repairs. So I feel like that was really surprising that I found.
Nice. One question, another question from the audience that I'm also very curious to know the answer to. That's related to this, kind of related to what you said, Brittany. Did you see a particular type of community organization that struggled with adaptation? Was it harder for some? So, like, you know, there's conversations about how we adapt all to COVID. Did you see any places that really struggled to do this?
I would say it was challenging maybe a little for the schools just because not everyone has Wi-Fi or computers at home. So just trying to be able to reach all the students and get their work finished, but at the same time, be able to reach everyone. So I feel like they struggled a little bit, yes.
Places in New York, or we have
Yeah, I agree with what she said. Over here in New York City, like I said earlier, there's a lot of daycares and schools that were being open. I think they, even though being open, were one of the places that have struggled a bit because of students. You have to make sure that, you know, students are safe, the teachers are safe, parents know, and guardians as well know what's going on with their kids and students. So I think that that's one of the places that really struggled with going into this pandemic. And over here in New York, it really hit hard, like very, very hard, the whole pandemic thing and the coronavirus. So the adaptation needed to be quick. And I think those were places that were really affected.
For me, I think from our group, I think most of the places like there's like more like I said before the health services. I think actually didn't like have any struggles because the only difference now, like some places actually you gotta like make an appointment before you go, like it's like by times. So like they're not actually open. They're only open for the people that have the appointment. So you gotta like make it online and then you go to the place. So I think that's some struggles that the place really like affect like COVID-19. Yes.
Thank you all. I think another question, which is also in the comments, but also a question I have as well, is about so the data you gathered. Did you think the data you gathered was representative of the community you mapped, and or do you think there's some voices or people that maybe weren't included?
I would say that the representations of our community should not be based off the data that we have mapped this year. Knowing that we're under certain circumstances with the pandemic, not many places were open, so some of the data may have been a little off, or some of the places, we couldn't have gone personally and got every single information that we needed. So I think a visual representation of our places should be when things are open or things are settled down, and we can actually get a better representation of what our communities are like, instead of having data that isn't the best data that we can gather, for our communities.
For us, for like Jackson High groups, I actually would say that Jackson High there is a representation of the community, because knowing that Jackson High has a high amount of health services that actually can help the community members throughout this time of the pandemic. So that I think actually is the data is a representation of the community.
I don't think our data this year is a good reflection, just because in Rocky Mount there are a lot of mom and pop shops, a lot of small businesses that have been hurt. A few places have permanently gone out of business because they weren't able to, their service didn't meet the needs that COVID presented. So I think maybe previous years, or hopefully sometime soon, we can see like a better representation. But I just think COVID put a lot of restrictions on small businesses that some people weren't able to cope in the right amount of time or find ways to adapt their business model to the current times.
Yeah, I think that's really. I think this question brings up a really good question. Like, what does it mean for it to be representative of the data, right? I appreciate all of you kind of talking about the limitations, or what makes it representative. So I think that's really really useful to think about. I think there's lots of questions in the chat. People are really have great questions. I think one question, particularly for the folks in New York, I have is about your like what do you call it, resource guides. And the question someone asked in the chat was, how receptive do you believe the community will be to using and receiving your research guides? Yeah.
I think that the communities will be very well thought out with the resource guides that we have provided for them if we do the right amount of distributes throughout New York City. So if we put it in the right places that we know that people will be paying attention and will find the resource guides interesting to them, or they'll be in the right state of mind to read these resource guides, then I think that they will be very effective towards our communities, especially during these times. People want to know the right information about their communities and what's going on in their communities, so it can affect individually or in bigger groups.
I also from by mapping. This actually helped the community members by they share hope about like letting them know about all the resources available for them and helping them on what they need. So like if they need some type of health services, like not like mental or dental or anything, they actually can know about these places and how they can, like how to make appointments, things like that, so they can like know what's around them.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think as I was saying, when I was seeing your presentations, like community resource guide is like a really important and really incredible like thing to add. Like it makes it easier to navigate your neighborhood. So in many ways, y'all are trailblazing for people, and that's pretty incredible. Another question, which is a question that I also have, which I enjoy, is like, so what's your favorite part about mapping this summer? And perhaps how does it compare to other mapping?
I said one of my favorite mapping experiences for the summer of 2020 would be realizing how much help we can give our communities based on the information that we have on specific disparities in our specific communities. So for the South Bronx, which was one of my main points of mapping, in the beginning of our mapping course, we had to utilize the community health profile that the South Bronx, that the Department of Health publishes every other year. In the article, some information that me and my other peer educators found was the big disparity of education. So kids in elementary and middle schools are missing a lot of school, and the Bronx has the lowest percentage of kids in class, as well as the Bronx having a low high school graduation percentage. So thanks to this article, we found that many daycares and preschools or schools in general are being done virtually. This can help disparities of education or the abstinence in schools for all around ages. So I guess what I'm saying would be the best part of mapping is able to have the right resources to help improve our communities and what we have around.
For me, I think my favorite part is like throughout this time we have been mapping mapping to help the community members by giving them the information that the places that are available for them. So at the end of the day, we actually helping people. I think that's a good thing about mapping at all.
I think my favorite part this year was just being able to see how resilient Rocky Mount is. So the companies or businesses that have managed to stay open and managed to adapt, how they're still kicking, and also how they're helping out their the other members of their community. I think that was really interesting and really insightful to see.
And Brittany, have you seen any new businesses pop up?
Not really, not from the mapping I've done and some of the other data I've seen. I haven't seen any new businesses, but I have seen like new adaptations.
Thank you. So I think we have time for one more question, and I think this is a great question to do. It's come from the audience. What are the lessons from this summer that we can apply to future programs, future MAPSCorps programs? And from your perspective as a young person.
I mean, it actually depends because like we don't know if this like next time it's gonna be like real mapping or online mapping. So it depends on the time and like on what we're doing.
Yeah, I agree with that answer, and I also want to add on that if it is done virtually, just make sure that you have a lot of options for your mapping skills, and learn that you have different ways on how to improve when you're mapping to be more efficient with your work and get the best resources that you have for your community. I have never done it in person because this was my first year and sadly we had to do it virtually. But I guess I would say the same thing. Just know that you are eligible for many different options and just be confident in the work that you're doing and make sure that people know that they can trust you with their information.
Yeah, I would just kind of hop off of that with kind of applying this year to previous years is the how much information there is online. So using that with doing the walking mapping, I think we can kind of combine what we're doing this year with what we've usually done between walking to different businesses.
I will say, I mean, I want to add to that, right, too. So like if you like interested in mapping, you gotta have, you gotta be patient. You gotta have respect, and you gotta have a little bit of vocation, because sometimes it's hard doing this, talking to strangers. But after all, I think this is a good thing, because we're doing good things for our community and actually helping people, like I said before.
Thank you all so much for this wonderful panel. I really appreciate your lessons and reflections. I love the idea of combining both types of mapping together. And I just really appreciate you all's honesty. And I don't think people often get to hear the voices of young people talking about what it means to be in a community. And so thank you for the service that you've done for your community, the beautiful things you've built. And thank you for gracing us with this panel. Truly, again, claps for y'all's. And also people in the comments are going, wow, read these comments, we're loving y'all. But thank you so much. We're gonna close out this panel and move on to our kind of closing parts of this presentation. So as I said before, how we're gonna close this beautiful symposium is by having some words from the illustrious Dr. Stacy Lindau, who is the founder and board president of MAPSCorps. This video will be the last bit of it, and then you will not see me again. So I will also say my goodbyes. Thank you so much for going on this journey with me. I'm so happy we got to hear from the young people. I hope that's been enriching to hear about how people are moving and serving their community. I'm deeply impressed and as usually moved. So I'm gonna go quietly weep to myself, and you all can go listen to Stacy, Dr. Lindau do an incredible job closing out this presentation. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, MAPSCorps, and congratulations on the many accomplishments that led us to complete summer 2020 mapping. As you all know, the vision of MAPSCorps is to cultivate scientific minds, healthy people, and invested citizens from the assets of our communities. Our mission is to train youth to produce high-quality data about community assets that everyone can use to improve the human condition. And you most certainly helped us achieve and advance our vision and mission this summer. I want to contemplate just for a moment leadership and youth. Here you see a picture of the jazz great Wynton Marsalis. My family and I had the privilege of seeing him in a concert earlier this year. Remember concerts? This was before the pandemic affected all of our lives. When the curtain went up, Mr. Marsalis was right front and center with the spotlight shining on him, and he played his horn beautifully, drawing us all into the experience. Soon after, though, he made his way to the back of the musicians, letting the light shine on everybody else. He introduced a group from South Africa, the Born Frees, and engaged us in enthusiasm for their work. This is leadership. It means being front and center at the beginning, but knowing when to take the back stage. And there's another leader here in the back. This is Andres Alviar, MAPSCorps' founding executive director. As many of you know, Andres is getting ready to move on to his next adventure, but he's been an exemplary leader for MAPSCorps, working behind the scenes to ensure that the youth have the meaningful, active, productive science and service to community experience that we're all about. So as you go on and become leaders, I want you to remember Mr. Marsalis, and I want you to thank Andres for showing you what it looks like to support from behind and let the light shine on others. Andres, from the staff and the board, we all thank you for your leadership. When we started this summer, we talked a little bit about NASA and how they approach assets and deficits. And here we see the picture of the Apollo 13 mission, where an oxygen tank exploded in outer space and NASA scientists had to figure out how to get their astronauts back to Earth. We talked about the maps of assets that NASA had and the experts on the ground who knew every working part on the spacecraft and on the astronauts themselves. This asset-based approach allowed NASA to choose to focus on what was working and to retrofit it to bring these important assets back to Earth. And we use this as inspiration for your work this summer, you being the experts of every working part in our communities, so we can leverage those assets to be healthier and to be more economically vital as we go forward. Here's an asset that MAPSCorps mapped. This is Morgan Park High School on the southwest side of the city. Maybe some of you are students there or are alumni, or you have friends who went there. There's a very important alumna of Morgan Park High School, and her name is Dr. Mae Jemison. Dr. Jemison was born in Alabama, went to Woodlawn, grew up in Woodlawn, and then graduated from Morgan Park High School. And she became the first Black woman to travel space when she served as a mission specialist on the Space Shuttle Endeavour. Her mother was a school teacher, and when Dr. Jemison and others talk about her life, they describe her love of science and the arts. She went to Stanford and got a Bachelor of Science. She also studied African and African American studies, just like Priscilla Ogbo, another mapper who went to Woodlawn Charter School and also went to Stanford. Dr. Jemison studied medicine at Cornell. She practiced medicine in Southern California. She's an accomplished dancer. She's even written children's books. And what she said is that we look at science as something very elite, which only a few people can learn. That's just not true, she says. You just have to start early and give kids a foundation. Kids live up or down to expectations. And we've held you to very high expectations this summer, and you have made us proud. As you go forward, you should be always held to high expectations, and you should hold others to the same. She also said this, and this is where I'll leave you today. You have the right to be involved. You have something important to contribute, and you have to take the risk to contribute it. This comment speaks to me to the idea of cultivating invested citizens, which we need now more than ever. And now you're not just invested, but you're experts on all the working parts of our communities. Congratulations, MAPSCorps, from all of us, and thank you for a great summer.